Welcome back, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. Today, for an update with our friend and colleague Stanislav Krapivnik. Stas, welcome back.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Great having you back. And we want to talk a little bit about the position of Russia today and also how maybe the most recent MOU between Iran and the United States is now impacting the logic or the thinking of Moscow. Stas, what are the updates from your end? I was also in Russia. I was also in Moscow, and actually my flight back to Switzerland was delayed because of drone attacks on Moscow. These drone attacks are getting more and more, and we've had last night a big one again. What is the mood at the moment?
Angry. That again, the mentality that or the European mentality that the narrative that Putin just woke up one day and he wanted to invade Ukraine just for, pardon my French, shits and giggles. That's an old American saying. And then just make it painful enough, and Russia will back off because it's just not worth it. Again avoiding, of course, the absolute point that this is an existential crisis for Russia. NATO nuclear missiles on its borders, as Blinken flat out said to Lavrov before all this started. We'll put whatever missiles we want on your border, whatever nuclear missiles, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, yes, there is, and that's how all of this started. That is, of course, being ignored by the Europeans and the Americans to a lesser degree. At one point, Marco Rubio did admit that this was a proxy war. The Europeans, of course, don't want to even admit that, but Europe is long past being a proxy war. Europe is an active military participant, and the pressure on Moscow is to strike Europe and strike it fast and strike it hard. As I said before, with Europe going into mass production of these drones, I mean, these drones are not produced by Ukraine. I mean, let's just put that myth to rest. They may be assembled in Ukraine as the destruction of the warehouse, the movie film warehouse proved by Ukraine's own stupidity when they were claiming that Russia just struck a warehouse full of old movies. And as they're filming, as their camera is filming, there's a whole set of wings under the rubble for drones, which they then try to scrub off the videos, but the internet never forgets. So the lesson is triple check before you put something up on the internet. But the Ukrainians do these kinds of mistakes constantly. So that most of these drones are put together in Ukraine. They're produced in Europe, quite flat out in Europe. So what we're looking at is, as I said before, the Europeans have gone into overdrive to try to break Russia. I'm assuming under the assumption that they think this is just a war of expansion because Putin just decided it, ignoring the entire narrative. If they're not ignoring the narrative, if they're just, if they're not buying in the narrative and they're just ignoring their own role in all this, then they're doubly stupid. So the Russians, as I've said before, Russia at this point has a choice: either a conventional war with Europe or a nuclear war with Northern Hemisphere. I'm not quite sure which one we're going to be going down, which route, because as I've said, the number of production of drones is increasing, and the waves are getting bigger, and you can always make a big enough wave sooner or later to overpower any anti-aircraft systems. Which was what happened. The majority of the drones were destroyed, but when the missiles ran out on the Panzer units and they had to be reloaded, is when the next wave that got through came through. Sorry, go ahead.
Are there any talks about the war in Ukraine, the military operation there, that once the Lugansk and Donetsk and the Donbass entirely is consolidated, that then it might be possible for Russia to somehow create a security parameter or something? And if it means that these drones are actually changing the forcing a change of the calculation, right? I mean, winning the war on the battlefield is not going to be enough anymore in order to stop the drones.
Well, winning the war on the battlefield is what the government has now decided. Negotiations are pointless. They'll still listen to the Europeans once in a while when they call up whatever inane remarks they have. But the question isn't whether the battlefield victory is no longer the aim, because it actually wasn't the aim originally. It is, I think, now the aim. But the question is, what does that constitute? Consolidating Donetsk, Lugansk has already been freed. Consolidating Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye is not enough, obviously. I think the realization is finally starting to hit in that no matter what is left of Ukraine, it's just going to be used as a terrorist base. What is not being told when you were in Russia recently, maybe you saw it on the news, is the total switch toward terrorism, absolute abject terrorism by the West and their proxy in Ukraine. And I'm going to say the West because the West is absolutely guilty and swimming in Russian blood. It's the West that's producing these drones. It's the West that's enabling the terrorism. And just a few incidents, just to run down a few incidents outside of the strike on Moscow, which, except for a couple strikes on the Moscow oil refinery, which were strikes. If you look at it, they weren't strikes in the refinery. They were strikes on the storage facilities. There's picture one of the lids flying off. These are relatively easy to replace. Refineries, like I've said many times, are very difficult to destroy. They're easy to damage, but they're equally easy to repair. And the problem is, pipes, blasted pipes with no fire don't make a good picture for Western media. That's why they strike the storage facilities. They go boom really big, and it makes a big picture, which then the West spreads all over. To keep from having to talk about Konstantinovka falling, from Druzhinka, which is the southern town of the Druzhinka, Kramatorsk, Slavinsk agglomeration being surrounded now from two sides. Russia's breaking through north to it from Dobropolye, DNR. They've broken away, started going north, so they're coming up behind this conglomeration. And then there's Russian forces about 6 kilometers away from Kramatorsk itself, and Slavinsk. And Krasny Liman is basically almost fully in Russian hands, which opens up strikes directly on the Slavics from the north. So they keep talking from that, or the Ryokov is surrounded from 3 directions, or that it's while Russian forces are quite up to Ryokov itself, they're about 5 kilometers out. Drone-wise, Ryokov is, and artillery-wise, it's in full tactical surround, or fully tactically surrounded. And cut off by drones and artillery on N08 highway. So that's the last in Zaporozhye, in central Zaporozhye. It's the last big fortress, the fortified town. After that, it's just villages up to Zaporozhye city itself. Or that Russian forces are now within about 5 kilometers of Sumy. To keep talking that, they've moved into total terrorism. And just as a few examples of terrorism, first of all, those flights, the majority of the drones that did get through, they weren't striking oil refineries. They're striking apartment buildings. I don't know if I sent you one of the videos. You might have seen them. I mean, these drones, they're not falling on apartment buildings. They're not clipping up apartment buildings by mistake. They're targeted directly into the center of apartment buildings, large apartment buildings. Occasionally, single family residence houses too. Also, sorry about that. But a quick rundown on just a few terrorist incidents over the last 2 weeks. Well, we all know about Starobielsk, except in the West, nobody knows about Starobielsk. That's the dormitory, 21 children killed, 19 girls, 3 boys, 40 plus injured, 16 drones. So when the West was finally trying to acknowledge that, well, yeah, it's something, the rocket went off course or something didn't go right. No, it's 16 drones. Yeah. Plus recon drones that were reconning it for half a day before the strike. So no, this isn't an accidentally it went off, or the AI. The typical excuse now for the Nuremberg trials of, well, I was just following orders, that got a lot of Nazis hung. Unfortunately, the majority of Nazis has got recycled by America and Britain into power in West Germany, and we see the results of that now. The excuse was I was just following orders. Now the excuse is, well, the AI told me to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
it's
modern.
bad. It's a very bad joke. It's not a joke. It's the same with Iran, and the same with everything that's
Oh yeah,
happening in Gaza. I mean, the Western alliances keep killing civilians at massive scale, and either blame the enemy for it, or blame AI, or blame a fallen rocket for it. Anything but admitting that they are intentionally targeting civilians as part of a terrorist
oh yeah.
attrition campaign.
And when they finally, if the few times they finally come to answer for their crimes, it's always, well, I didn't do it. I was just following orders, or the AI told me, or there was a loose, pardon my French, a loose hair up my arse, and I just pushed the wrong button. That's anything but to take accountability for their murderous actions. That's what we see about modern Western civilization. Anything but to take responsibility. They'll happily murder, pillage, and rape, but it's not our fault. It's always somebody else. It's PTSD. It's the weather. It's the flies. It's the AI. It's anything but us. Actually, just this is our nature, and this is why we're murdering and pillaging. This is
There was this other instance just last week that I think people don't get, just how impactful it is. There was the Ukrainian drones then blowing up this big war memorial in Sevastopol.
yes.
A piece of art, a piece of culture, a piece of Second World War memory, or Great Patriotic War memory.
No. It's from the Crimean War.
Sorry, the Crimean War. Yeah.
In World War II, actually, the Nazis also bombed it in 1941.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
that was the
the
big
previous Nazis.
but it's hard. I think one of the things I understood after 1 week in Russia is how much value Russians attach to culture, and
Yes.
to this kind of memory of the past. So blowing this thing up has zero battlefield value. All it does is make Russia angry, right? And Russians angry. Is that about it?
Right. And then other incidents to follow, for example, CCTV is everywhere these days. So whether it's just private cameras on houses, whether it's traffic cameras, so on. So you see all these videos. You have to get pretty far away from a town or a village to be camera free. So all of this gets caught. We've had attacks on one. They took out two buses. One bus. This is a week ago. One bus, thankfully, nobody was injured. And second bus, 8 people burned to death, 11 people injured out of 46. It was an overnight bus going through a town, and you see the drone, an FPV drone, one of the big ones with the big battery block on it, so you can go pretty far, going directly into the side of the bus as the bus is driving down the street. Then there was attacks on children. There was one video where 4 children, 4 teenagers in a car, they screech to a halt in front of the house, and they all run in, and the drone follows them in. Thankfully, they got the door closed when the drone hit the door, so nobody was injured. Then there was another one with a 12 and a 13-year-old that were killed on a bicycle because, this is Ukraine, this is the West, this is Murder Incorporated. This is what, like it or not, these are Western values. Why? Because this is what the values the West projects everywhere around the world: murder, mayhem, destruction of children, be it through various procedures, be it through direct murder, whatever. The West is, I mean, this is the Epstein class's values that's projected large. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, there was a Belarusian bus that was hit with a kid's soccer team on their football team. They just switched on the cartoons. I mean, to understand the age of these children, they just switched on the cartoons as they were driving. The coach's wife was killed. 2 adults were heavily injured, and 4 children. Lukashenko, I don't know what his reaction is. So far, it's just been a mean note to Ukraine. So I guess Lukashenko's, for all his big talk, is not going to do anything about it. And this was specifically targeted bus. They just gone from Belarus, Rus into Russia, into Bryansk. They were heading to the south toward the Black Sea. There's been attacks on, I mean, in Belgrade, there's a video of an FPV drone striking a truck at a red light, at a traffic stop, killing the driver, just flying right into his front windshield, and so on and so on. I mean, these videos are all over the place. The Ukraine has turned from partially being a terrorist outfit to being a full terrorist outfit under the control of let's not mince words, under the control of the three supreme terrorist organizations of this planet: CIA, MI6, and MI6 and Mossad. Basically, you all work as one organization. They're the ones that created the SBU, the modern SBU. They're the ones that the plan, the original plan in the U.S. Was for Russia to to provoke Russia enough for it to grab Ukraine, grab all of Ukraine fast and hard, and then start a partisan guerrilla war that would bleed Russia for years. They didn't quite get that. What they got was a war of attrition, and basically everybody that could have been volunteered up for partisan duty is now dead. And the people that are alive, and once this conflict is actually over, if they're still alive, they're going to be just very happy to still be alive, let alone to start something else up. So now they've turned to terrorism.
What does this do? I mean, this type of warfare is, of course, the kind of warfare of the losing end, right? But it is something that extracts a very heavy toll on Russia, on Russian society, on the civil population, which increases the pressure on the government to do something and to go even further out. And in my view, what they're trying to do is to provoke Russia into a next big escalation, so attacking NATO territory. Because, let's look at it realistically. The only thing that could hypothetically still turn things around is an all-out European NATO war against Russia, right? And this is what Zelensky and Ukraine wanted from the beginning. 2 years ago, when a Ukrainian missile killed 2 Polish farmers, the first thing the guy said is that this is an Article 5, you all must come to war with us. The Europeans very quickly shut him down. And NATO, for the longest time, shut this down, because the one thing that Russia and the Europeans seem to have agreed upon is that the war in Ukraine remains inside Ukraine and should not spill over. But Europe has now worked bit by bit of trying to salami slice this agreement into, no, we are expanding it into Russia, but not into Europe. And this is of course a game of fire with fire. As soon as Russia decides that no, if we are bleeding and we get blow up, we will blow up you, well, then we will have an all-European war, and we are not that far away from it anymore, are we?
No, we're not. We're on the edge of it. And honestly speaking, from day one, I was saying when Slovakia, under the previous government, gave weapons over, the first heavy weapons over to Ukraine, I'd said from the very beginning, you need to hit Slovakia. We need to hit Slovakia very, very hard. And this all would have been avoided. Why Slovakia? Because Slovakia is a small country, and NATO would have gone, oh, that's not us. We were never for that. That's those idiot Slovaks. We told them not to do that. Oh, they still did it. Okay, well, but Russia didn't do that. And everybody went, okay, so they didn't hit Slovakia, so the gates of hell opened up. And off we went on the escalation ladder. It's not even a ladder; it's an escalator. The escalation escalator that's going at full speed. Now, an interesting thing about Ukraine that you mentioned, that Ukraine killed 2 Poles. Ukraine's actually attacked NATO on continuous times. It's an interesting concept how many civilians and how much infrastructure has been destroyed by NATO. To show, I mean, in NATO, in the EU by Ukraine, just to show you how pathetic these organizations are. They're quite willing to sacrifice their people in mass. Ukraine has hit oil refineries in Hungary, Slovakia, Romania. Ukraine sabotage units have hit other infrastructure. They've killed, they hit multiple ships in territorial waters of Turkey coming out of the Bosphorus Straits. They've hit a Turkish flagged tanker. They've sunk a Turkish cutter, military cutter. And the Turks, Erdogan, yes,
they remember that one.
Yeah, that was about a month ago. Luckily for them, Erdogan has removed his spine, separated the vertebrae, and put one vertebrae in every chair he can sit in because his arse isn't big enough to cover all those chairs. Erdogan is a spineless profiteer. All the things he said about stopping the Israelis while sending 57 oil tankers to Israel, redirecting. Erdogan is a good muppet and nothing more. As the great sultan in Turkey. So even though the Ukrainians are carrying out direct attacks on Turks on a NATO country, it's all okay. I mean, then again, they've struck a Greek tanker before that was coming in to get refilled or to get filled up with oil off of the Caspian consortium, the Caspian Oil Authority, or Caspian Oil Authority, Caspian Oil Consortium, which is, by the way, is majority owned by Chevron. They've damaged that equipment, but the Greeks are just the same thing. The Greek government is an occupation government that doesn't give a damn what the people want. So obviously, that's Western democracy. But the most interesting attempt at mass murder by Ukraine, and this would have been mass murder, was Romania. Remember those 4 drones that got away from Ukraine? When the aviation drones are coming in into areas like St. Petersburg, are trying to come in from Finland and from Latvia and Lithuania, and I'm saying from, not through, definitely from Latvia. What the Russian electronic warfare does is it breaks their encryption and it pumps in new coordinates and just turns them around. But that's right on the border, right? So they're not flying very far. What the Ukrainians are saying is these drones were supposed to go to Crimea, and they accidentally wound up in Consta, Romania, several hundred kilometers. Well, there's been a guy by the name of Mikhail Luska, who is head of the PPR party in Romania, former member of parliament, and he's not the only one, but he is probably the loudest one who's flat out said, we just avoided mass murder by Ukraine. The drones were aiming at 2 facilities in the Port of Costa, the oil storage facility and the fertilizer facility, the nitrate storage. Remember the explosion in Beirut?
Yeah.
The only thing that stopped these drones was the spill buoys, these long buoys for any spilled oil, since oil is lighter than water and floats. They put these out, and they had been put out near the oil storage facility just in case, as a precaution. And one of those drones got stuck in it. And luckily, before they could blow those drones, people showed up and they started videotaping that. Because if those drones had exploded, you wouldn't have found any pieces of those drones to prove those Ukrainians. This is another false flag that would have killed half the city of Kosta. A mass casualty event for the Romanians to try to get Romania into the war and NATO into the war. So Ukraine and the 3 terrorist organizations, CIA, MI6, Mossad, are out of control, totally out of control.
But now, how do you think Russia will actually approach that? Because if Russia does nothing, then this terrorist tactics will succeed in grinding down Russia. And if Russia actually does attack NATO territory and these facilities in which parts of these drones are being manufactured, then they also win, because then they get the big war. It's kind of a very, very sick way of escalating or closing all doors to non-escalation, actually.
Right. Well, if I personally prefer the conventional war, we'll win the conventional war, because the alternative is a nuclear war. And that's just quite simply, that is the only 2-state solution right there. Either state 1 is a conventional war, state 2 is a nuclear war. There is no other way out. That the Europeans are either too psychopathic, or the European population is clueless, except for the people that listen to your show and other shows like that.
No, they're utterly clueless, and I just need to throw this in here. On the one hand, we have Mr. Karaganov and on Glenn Beeson's show talking about the fact that his argument of doing a limited nuclear strike is now gaining gaining currency in Russia. And there was a very interesting debate actually also with John Mearsheimer recently. But on the one hand, we have that. On the other hand, we have the Europeans who are utterly clueless. I was listening to a show of Swiss TV, because that's one of the things I could still listen to, and they were discussing about the morals behind, maybe exporting weapons to Ukraine. The Swiss currently don't do it, but there was this discussion: should we not? The morals of it. Not once within an hour it crossed their minds to go through the argument that if Switzerland sends weapons to Ukraine and these weapons are used to kill Russians, then, well, maybe the Russians are just gonna Oreshnik Switzerland, or at least the facilities where this is being done. That didn't even come up once. That's the level to which Europe at the moment, including Switzerland, has lost all kind of ability to think about war in a realist framework. And it makes zero sense to me, but that's just as a piece of information of how far down a very sick rabbit hole we are in Europe.
And for that, Glenn got a mention by Minister of Defense Tore Sandvik, Minister of Defense of Norway, when he was asked about Russian influence and who was influencing Russian influence in Norway. He flat out said Professor Glenn Diesen. So now Glenn has been mentioned as a direct threat to the Norwegian government by the Norwegian government for, doing things like, stating the obvious. We may be in a war. Do we really want to do this?
We, on our side, with a megaphone, as many as we can find, we keep warning that we are walking, not sleepwalking, like we are like wide awake and walking straight into a pool of blood, our own blood. That's gonna be. And these people, they think that is Russian propaganda. So this is how far this psychosis has already twisted people and shut them off from the obvious. You could show them a knife, they would claim it's an ice cream, and the blade. It's insane.
The problem again with mass psychosis, what your guest didn't. I can't remember the professor's name.
Matthias Esmet.
Mikey says, I need to talk to him sometime too. What he didn't go into is how do you break a mass psychosis? You cannot break a mass psychosis by itself. It'll either wind down when the population ages out. If you look at the Iranian government, yes, there was a mass psychosis at the beginning of the Iranian government. The Iranian government's liberalized since then. I mean, when Americans say we're going to come to free their women by blowing them up, but so they can not have to cover their heads. Well, they already don't have to cover their heads. It's liberalized. Soviet Union went through the same thing. Soviet Union was a radical the state that used state terror and oppression to control the people. Post World War II, that went down quite a bit, or during World War II, and then post World War II, and even Khrushchev's new campaign, which Stalin, by the way, stopped all the campaigns versus the church. Quite the opposite. The Komsomol movement, the young communist movement, was sent to rebuild churches, including the cathedrals of the patriarchy in Sergei Posad. That was rebuilt by the young communists in 1946, 1947. The drive on the church started again under Khrushchev, but it was a different drive. It wasn't concentration or gulags. There weren't concentration camps or gulags, labor camps. It wasn't things. It was a propaganda war. And when Khrushchev was removed by the Politburo, one of the points for his removal was excess pressure on the church. So it started mellowing out at that point because that revolutionary generation was gone. The next generation said, well, no, we don't need it. So these mass formations, not in defense of the Nazis, but realistically speaking, if the Nazis had won World War II, in a generation or two, they would have started mellowing out too, because all radical organizations do it. If they don't, they just burn themselves out into nothing. However, the other way if you don't want to wait a couple of generations or 2 generations for the mass psychosis start passing, and God only knows how many victims would have happened before the Nazis would have mellowed out, it would have been, it was when they say Stalin killed as many, said that's a lie. That is such a blatant lie. Stalin, no, I'm not saying Stalin's some angel, but the gulags were not concentration camps; they were labor camps. They varied extremely from extreme brutality to university campuses. Solzhenitsyn, by the way, was on a university campus. MiG and Sukhoi were formed out of two gulags that were university campuses. So it was a very varied system. But the overall purges 3, maybe 5 million people, which is not a small number. But when you compare that to what? Just the concentration camps, Hitler was setting up 12 million people. Nobody remembers the other 6 million people in the camps. Only one particular demographic gets all the mention. Plus the mass murders in Ukraine, in Soviet Union, the mass murders and executions in Greece, in Yugoslavia, and so on. The death toll was gigantic. But the other way to break the mass psychosis is to break the government. Because if you look at all these adamant anti-Nazis in Germany, the older generation, they were all Hitler Jungen. They were all Hitler Jungen. And when the German, when the Nazi government was broken, is when they woke up.
Now, the West did something extremely dangerous, which is set the precedent that, if you don't like the heads of state of another government, you can just go out and kill them. There's no more, that kind of quiet, tacit agreement that you don't attack each other's leaders, that is gone, right? And do you think that people in Russia now in the Kremlin are actually like starting to talk about the pros and cons of doing decapitation strikes like Western style?
Of course. Look, why do people sign the Geneva Convention on POWs? It's not because they're humane. It's not because I want to take care of my enemy's POWs.
Because both sides get something out of it. You get
Exactly.
something too. So if you don't get anything anymore, you're not going to live up to them. Yeah.
Exactly. Your aim is it's not that I want to be humane to the POWs, or maybe I do. Russians have that tendency of being silly like that. We're not part of the garden culture. We're from the jungle. We actually don't shoot people that surrender. But really, the reason most people sign is so their POWs, their people that are taking POWs, aren't shot or sent off in the minefields and things like that. So yes, absolutely, they get something out of it. Why do you not murder foreign leaders? So you don't get murdered. It's a give and a take. I won't kill you, and I won't target your foreign leadership, so you don't target my my leadership. And the West, in its absolute childlike ignorance, has actually gone and said, well, led by the Americans, of course, because I would say probably the last two adults that ran America were Reagan and Papa Bush. As hard as that is, maybe it's some people to swallow, but they were the last two adults in the room. Everybody since then have been ever more degrading, childlike actors. I mean, look, Reagan, when Reagan saw two things that are interesting about Reagan. The Israelis went into Lebanon, into Beirut. There was no Hezbollah at that point, by the way, in the 1980s. Reagan was showing pictures of dead children. And he was so outraged, he called the Israelis and said, get the hell out now. And the Israelis broke and left because they knew that there was either they did it or their relationship with the U.S. was over. So Reagan made the Israelis get out of Beirut back in the 80s. And then Papa Bush, he cut them off because they continued their operations. And Papa Bush just, he cut them off from supply. Supplies got switched back on under Clinton. Biden quote just to finish real quick. Biden quote cut them off. He kept one shipment away as a PR move, but it front loaded them so much that it didn't matter, and then everything went back on.
Let's use this as a segue into talking a little bit about what we are witnessing with Iran, and actually the fact that yesterday, the Israelis are on a temper tantrum, like one that I haven't seen for a while, including saying that they're cutting off ties with Kaya Kallas because Kallas compared them to apartheid South Africa, which is actually unfair toward apartheid South Africa because they never implemented a genocide on the scale of the Israelis. But are we witnessing some kind of change in this relationship, or is it just the next phase of the great theater that is U.S. hegemonic foreign policy?
I'm tending toward the theater option. We just had a 15-minute break to get coffee and get a Chardonnay, and now we're back starting to watch the next act. On apartheid South Africa, whatever you want to say, but the blacks in apartheid South Africa were citizens. Sure,
Yeah.
they were citizens of a second class. They didn't get the resources. A lot of them actually served in the military, but they were citizens, and a few did break through the barriers, but they're more the exception. They're the exception, not the rule. But they were citizens, so they had a certain amount of rights under the Constitution of South Africa. And maybe even without pressure from outside, that would have mellowed out with time too, as all systems tend. Tend to go to equilibrium sooner or later. Every system, no matter how radical it is, will over generations go toward equilibrium because the radicalism is unsustainable in the long term, regardless of what government you have. But yeah, these people, the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, they're not citizens. They have no rights. They're not treated as second class or in third class citizens or even non-citizen residents. They're treated as, I mean, let's just listen to what the Israeli government people say. They're animals. They're to be destroyed. They're rats. They're subhumans. I mean, the language that the Nazis used against their victims, the new generation is using against their victims. I mean, there's about 30% of the Israeli population that are either traditional Jews, most of them were there long before Israel showed up, that look at Israel as an abomination in the traditional Jewish view. Jews are punished by God and cannot have their own government until the Messiah returns, at which point they will get their government. Anything before that is considered blasphemy. So they, as they say, we were here before the state of Israel, we'll be here after the state of Israel. And then there's progressive Israelis, which there aren't that many of, because most of the progressive Israelis turned into rabid psychopaths after 7th of October. But there's progressive Israelis that have kept their head on their shoulder and said, this is wrong, this is mass murder. It's about 30% of the population. The other 70% of the population are rabid psychopaths in one degree or another. Look, the main criticism of Netanyahu is he's not doing enough.
Yeah.
So, just to finish that thought, the opposition is more radical than Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is pretty damn radical. So what you get is a choice of, do you want the brown shirts in or the black shirts in?
But again, like, Israel couldn't do all of this if it wasn't for the complete support of the United States, with all of these money and weapons and production and the supply lines, and of course that includes then also the that includes Europe with Germany and the UK and so on, and the intelligence sharing. I mean, the everything that's being done couldn't happen if it wasn't for this kind of Western integration of genocide enabling and then genocide pulling off genocide. And of course, also the war against Iran. Now, Iran found an answer. And Iran's answer was A, be able to absorb, B, always be able to strike back at targets of equal thing. These two pillars managed to force the Americans to sign a document which, to all intents and purposes, is just a declaration of surrender. Whether they will actually then go along with it is another question, but they signed that thing, which to me means something. But what do you read into it, and how do you think it's going to inform Russia's way of going forward?
Well, it's informed Russia's way from day one when Iran starts striking American bases. And as I've said before, the U.S. is not going to escalate to a nuclear war. And against Iran, which, by the way, may now have nuclear weapons, according to various sources. But Larry Johnson, Pepe Escobar, well, it's not them. They're just repeating what they got from a high, I mean, I'm friends with Larry. I was talking with him about it. They're just repeating what they were told by a high-placed Pakistani official who got the information directly from Iran to give to the Americans, because, the Pakistanis are in between. By the way, Vance, for quote logistics reasons, they haven't flown out to meet with the Iranians yet, as they were supposed to have already. Now, Russian
announced this morning that it's off; they're not coming.
Oh, yeah. Well, Russian intelligence passed on, and this was published in a couple of articles in Iran. Russian intelligence passed on to the Iranians that the Americans are just going to use this for stalling time to reposition and prepare for the next attack on Iran.
Yeah,
that nobody's backed off. This is all theater. So that's what I'm saying. We've the intermission is over. We're going back to the next act. Chuck down what's left of the Chardonnay. and get the popcorn out, because this isn't over.
But I have this very strong suspicion that at least part of this MOU, or the fact that the United States put its signature under it, the Donald Trump, might have to do with the Gulf states. The Gulf states, 2 times we know, said no to the United States doing further attacks on Iran twice. And I have this suspicion that Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain might have told the United States, you need to, either this ends with some form of agreement, or we are going to cancel our base agreements with you, and we're gonna tell you to leave. If that happened, it would be even worse than that agreement, because it would make it physically impossible for the United States to still have military impact in the region. This is pure speculation, but I have a very strong suspicion about it.
If they were rational actors, I would say yes. If they're rational actors. The unfortunate part about the Arabs, in general, most of the Arab countries in general, is they're bought and paid for, and they're either spineless, or they're they're very two-faced. Look, the Saudis, they once said, we're not going to use our airspace, but everybody used their airspace. We're not going to participate, but they launched missiles, and so did the Kuwaitis, obviously, and so did the Bahrainians, and so did the Qataris. Well, I'm not going to talk about UAE, where the president of the UAE, which is just 7 separate sheikdoms, grew up playing Call of Duty and thinks war is Call of Duty. And sorry, there's no reset buttons. These guys have been duplicitous to the extreme. Plus, just look at what they do for Israel. All the big words, and yet they're allowing other Arabs to be murdered without any kind of restraint. Quite the opposite, if anything else. Quietly, they support the Israelis, even though, if you listen to the Greater Israel Project, half of Saudi Arabia, about a third of Egypt, all of Jordan, all of Syria, basically, well, almost all of Syria, Lebanon, all supposed to go to the Israelis, minus the people that live there right now. And a good chunk of Iraq. The Iraqis are the only ones that have shown, well, and to a degree, the Lebanese, but not their government, has shown any kind of spine and dedication to any kind of principles. Iranians are, of course, are not Arabs, and as Persians, they've shown quite a different mentality, a mentality shaped by civilization that's 4,000 years old. So yeah, I think we're looking at the next round starting up. The Americans, look. Why would the Americans suddenly become trustworthy? The same Americans that, by the way, murdered and attacked, the same people, the exact same people.
No, I'm not saying that we should put any trust into this agreement, and the Iranians do exactly the right thing. They're saying, like, we have all the ability to verify, and if they don't live up to it, then we're gonna go straight back. I mean, they're not blue-eyed about any of it. However, the fact remains that Donald Trump put his signature underneath that document, that, and he even signed it in Versailles. I mean, it can't get much more.
Don't worry. Trump had no idea what Versailles means.
Him, obviously, but it's
obviously,
how history has this thing about being
patterns.
The ironies wherever you look. I mean, littered with ironies, history.
Yes,
but
yes.
Still, I mean, they signed that thing, so
Yeah.
they must be quite desperate in that case for a break. That's the minimum we can judge from it, right?
Well, look. First of all, the U.S. is almost out of reserves.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing thing for Americans. They should be. But
Stas? Okay, you're back.
yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Go
we're back.
again. They
The
are.
difference between
They are.
the difference between the American and Chinese approach. So the story about the ant and the grasshopper,
Yes.
right? So the Chinese are the story about the ant and the grasshopper. When they've got huge reserves, all these other Eastern Asian countries came running, knocking at the door. Please give us some of your reserves. And the Chinese ant said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Grasshopper. You should have prepared better for winter. Go away now. Bye-bye. This is for China. Chinese reserves for China." America, on the other hand, are a very different type of ant that said, "Hey, Who's got money? I'll sell you anything. Screw the rest of the ants in my anthill. I'm willing to give it away to anybody because that is the American government approach. The American reserves are not for Americans; they're for anybody else. So American prices continue to rise to a degree, but they did tamper down the stock market, which is the only thing that matters to Trump and his people around him for the most part. But there are elections on the horizon, and the driving season's in. And prices, by the way, when Trump signed, prices fell under $4, $3.99 on the average, but under $4. And that actually, this off-price pricing actually works on people. Believe it or not, that's that's why you have under $4, $3.99, $3.97, and people's mentality goes, oh yeah, that's under $4, under $5, and €5, what have you. And it actually works on the majority of people. If you take marketing courses, that's one of the things you get taught in them. The human mentality. They don't round up. Oh, it's under $5. Yeah, it's like 2 cents under $5. It's $5. But it works. Unbelievably, human mentality actually works that way. So Trump gets that temporary victory. People calm down. His approval ratings actually went up by 2 points. But again, this is all temporary because I think with the Israelis, this is absolute theater. The donor class hasn't gone away anywhere. They still hold Trump by the, as they say in the South, by the short and curlies. And he's not going anywhere. Nothing's changed. What's changed in the American government? Nothing's changed in the American government. These are the very same people that have attacked several times people that they're in the middle of negotiations with, murdered the negotiators, murdered civilians in mass, or supported those that murdered civilians in mass, as in last summer. What has changed? Has the parties involved changed? No. None of them have changed. The same players. So suddenly these same players are now trustworthy? They've had a come to Jesus moment? No, they haven't.
No, but what has changed is, start going from 28th of February to like we will obliterate you, you will either surrender or die, to signing a document that says like, yeah, we respect each other's sovereignty and we will pay $300 billion in reparations. I mean, that's a change. And that change came about by Iran being able to strike everything in the region that was somehow connected to the Americans. So, that I wonder if that has an impact, or again, if also this part is just part of the make believe.
Pascal, I'm gonna unfortunately lower your excitement down a little bit, enthusiasm. So if you watch my last episode with Larry Johnson, we record one a week, and Larry was on a call on a group chat with various American generals and colonels, retired and active duty. All of them, apparently, a lot of them were itching for a big fight with Russia because we can take the Russians. And we won against Iran. A lot of them believe they won against Iran. These are people that should know or understand, but they are.
How would that be a win? I mean, are we living in a parallel universe?
What color is the sky? Take a look in the window. What color is the sky over your head? It's blue for me, but maybe it's actually green for them, or yellow. I don't know. They are literally, the reality that you understand, only you understand. That reality exists only for you. Each one of us has our own reality. Just like your view of yourself exists only in your head. Everybody has a different understanding of you, or a view of you. That's just human reality. And the reality of who won and who lost apparently is a very different reality. People can convince themselves of anything. That's the power of humanity. We can rationalize and convince ourselves of anything.
Stas,
they're flat earthers, for God's sakes.
Stas, thank you very much. At the end of the interview, we are firmly now inside constructivism, and everything is relative, and nothing really exists. And Rick and Morty were always right, and what we need is a purple gun in order to get out here. My friend, because we have to wind it down, but thank you for the insights that you shared. People who want to follow you, they give us your channels, please.
Okay, so Substack is Zmei Garenich, which was a three-headed dragon in Slavic mythology. It's the only cool name I could find left on Substack that wasn't already taken. The
Your
The,
reason for naming stuff. Okay.
yeah, I know. You should go with that. I want a cool name. Everything's taken. Like,
All right.
jeez.
Next one.
X is Stanis Krapivnik. Couldn't fit the full name, so yeah, we Russians like our names long. That's how we get to learn how to read and write early on. Then there's YouTube at Mr. Slavic Man, all one word, Slavic with a K, and Telegram. Stas today Обратно is the Russian language channel, and Stas was there is the English language channel. And there is some difference of what I post on the two. Because you don't get everything in translation from one to the other.
I will do my best. I will do my best to remember to put all of these links into the description box below. If I forget, I apologize in advance. Stas Krapivnik, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.